Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Jumah Nights Q&A series. Inshallah, this week we've got a question from none other than our very own beloved brother Ahmed Gokul about the topic of Istikhara. And this is a topic that a lot of you will be familiar with as a concept, but there's a lot of misconceptions that exist around the topic that should be clarified. So inshallah, without further ado, let's get straight into it. The questioner asks, Istikhara holds a varied place in Islamic practice. Some reserve it for major decisions, others engage in it routinely, while some remain skeptical. From the perspective of qadr, divine decree, epistemological legitimacy and methodological rigor, what is the underlying philosophy and function of Istikhara? So as you can see, Brother Ahmed's asked a very loaded, in-depth question, and we're going to go through all of the parts of the question, inshallah. First of all, we need to start with the definition of what is Istikhara. Istikhara, it comes from the Arabic root word khair. And Istikhara is the action when an individual seeks the best from Allah. Yastakhiru billah. He seeks the best from Allah and in a decision or something that he has done in his life. Most of you will be familiar with a specific kind of Istikhara. Perhaps if you're a Shi'i viewer, which most of you will be, you'll be familiar with one type of Istikhara, whereas maybe someone watching from an opposing sect, they'll be more familiar with another type of Istikhara. But today we're going to discuss the differences between different kinds of Istikhara, and we'll go through these definitions as the show goes on, and you'll understand what I mean by when I say these different types of Istikhara. So answer the questions, we're going to discuss the following. Number one, what is the two types of Istikhara and examples of them in the Qur'an and Hadith? Number two, when should it be done? And what are some modern misconceptions surrounding Istikhara? Number three, what is the advice of our scholars with relation to this concept, considering this is a Fiqhi topic to some extent? And number four, what are further books you can read to further understand the concept of Istikhara? So whether you've heard of Istikhara as a special prayer to ask for specific needs, or whether you've heard of it as a method of designation or making a decision, stay tuned, because there's going to be something for all of you, inshallah, take away from this episode. We're going to start with the first question. What are the two types of Istikhara? The first type is the one that, as Shi'i viewers, most of you will be very familiar with, which is al-Istikhara bil-Qur'ah. What that is that when you have a decision that you want to take and you're very confused about it, you're stuck between two decisions, you'll see that many people, they do Istikhara through the Qur'an. There'll be many narrations that people will refer to where they'll do a form of Istikhara using either Qur'an or with a Tasbih or with papers, or many different ways of doing this Istikhara. This is the type of Istikhara whereby you're looking for a decision to be made. So you're confused about something, you do this method, you take this method of Istikhara, and you want an answer to tell you either do this thing or don't do this thing, right? So that is al-Istikhara bil-Qur'ah, and this is a consultative Istikhara, basically. This is you asking God to give you a sign in which you're able to understand basically what decision you should take. The second type of Istikhara is Istikhara to du'a. Istikhara to du'a is when you have already decided to do something. So say for example, I want to buy a house. I've already decided that I'm going to buy this house. I've already consulted the experts. I have no confusion about this. I've already decided I'm going to buy this house. Then I do Istikhara to du'a. Istikhara to du'a is a method through which you recite a specific prayer, or you'll do some sort of ritual, and then you ask Allah, Ya Allah, I've taken this decision, please place khair in it. So you're not asking for an answer from the Istikhara, right? You're asking for Allah to place khair in the decision you've already taken, or to take you away from it if it's bad for you, for example. So this is like a divine decree. This is something where you're asking for Allah's kind of unseen guidance and support in a matter. And that's Istikhara to du'a, whereby you're not asking for an answer, you're just asking for support and for khair from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Both of these forms, they share the same spirit. You're turning sincerely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance, but the circumstances in which each is used, they differ. And this is where the most important discussion comes with regards to Istikhara. How should they be practiced? When should these be used? And what is the basis for them in the Qur'an and Hadith? We see in the Qur'an that Allah mentions in the Qur'an multiple times. Allah says in the Qur'an, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, فَإِذَا أَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Once you've made a decision, keep your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And this is to show you that you can come to a decision without doing istikhara, right? Without doing istikhara al-Qur'ah, which is to find a yes or no, right? You can come to a decision like by yourself, and you can trust in Allah in the decision that you've made. And we also see in the Qur'an the emphasis on making dua towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The very, very famous ayat of the Qur'an where Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. He says to Rasulullah, if my servant asks you about me, then I am near. I answer the call of the ones who call me. So he's saying here, call upon me, right? This is a order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an emphasis of making dua towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are the exemplar in showing us how we should make dua. We see in many, many du'as where the imams, they're praying for small things in their lives. Like in Dua al-Arafah, we see Imam al-Hussein, he's thanking Allah and asking Allah for even the smallest things in his life, like the salt in his food. So we can see that this is a constant thing that is required of you in all of your life. Dua should be something that is part of your life at all times. Whereas Istikhara to al-Qur'ah, which is the one that many people are familiar with, is something that is specific to specific circumstances. If we take examples in Bihar al-Anwar, and Bihar al-Anwar is a good source if you want to look at some of the reports to do with Istikhara. This is volume number 88. There is a section called Abwab al-Istikharat wa Fadliha wa Kayfiyatiha. It says these are the chapters to do with Istikhara, the merit of Istikhara, and how you should be done. And you can see that there's different types of Istikhara that I mentioned here with regards to Istikhara al-Qur'ah, which is al-Istikhara bil-Qur'an. We have here al-Istishara, al-Istikhara bil-Istishara, which is to seek counsel. Bab al-Istikhara bil-Sabha wal-Hasa, which is with the Tasbih or with the beads. You have al-Istikhara bil-Ruqa, which is with the papers. And you have al-Istikhara bil-Qalb, right, which is with the heart. So you can see there's many, many examples here about that, and there's different methods of doing them. So you'll see, for example, if you go onto du'as.org and you go into the section for al-Istikhara, you'll see maybe 10 or 11 narrations from the Imams alayhim salam on different ways on how to do Istikhara with the Qur'an. It will say, for example, you read a salawat, you read Surah al-Ikhlas, you read a specific dua, and you open the Qur'an and you take the indication from the top right of the page, is the first ayah that you see on the top right. So, and you'll see that there are books that have been written by certain ulama you can find online, whereby each of the ayat on the right side of the page, the ulama have given their understanding as to whether this is a good ayah, a bad ayah, whether you should do it or you shouldn't do it. This is one kind of like method of doing Istikhara. You'll see the narrations with regards to the masbaha and the beads, and all of these are different processes of being able to draw either a yes or a no from your Istikhara. There's some very, very interesting reports that I want to go through in this chapter, just so we can get kind of an understanding of how important is al-Istikhara as a concept in Islam. We have here a narration from Sayyid ibn Tawus. He mentions that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, he says, يقول الله عز وجل من شقاء أبدي أن يعمل الأعمال ولا يستخير بي. He says that this is from the misery or the evil of a servant, that he does things and he doesn't do istikhara by me. Now, some people, if they have one understanding of istikhara, which is al-Istikhara bil-Qur'ah, which is the istikhara of the Qur'an, they would assume, oh, this is saying I should do istikhara more often, right? People, if you were to hear this on the minbar, your mind would go straight to al-Istikhara bil-Qur'an, by the Qur'an. And it's possible that it does refer to this on a secondary level, in a state of confusion, for example. Some people don't turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to solve their confusion. But on a primary layer, these riwayat, these narrations are speaking about Istikharah al-du'a. Istikharah al-du'a, and we see the symmetry across all of the reports. We have the wasiyah of Imam al-Hasan, Imam Ali alayhi salam to Imam al-Hasan in Nahj al-Balagha. I believe it's sermon number 31. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says to Imam al-Hasan, وَأَكْثِرِ الْإِسْتِخَارَةِ, right? Make sure that you do more and more istikhara. That is referring to Istikharah al-du'a. Whenever you take an action in life, make sure that you pray to Allah to place khair in it. And Allah here is saying that it's from the evil of my servants that they don't do istikhara by me. So this is speaking about Istikharah al-du'a. And this is really, really important, especially for some people in our communities, in the Shia community. When they hear istikhara, they think Istikhara al-Qur'ah. They think of the istikhara that you want a decision from, yes or no. But many forget about the importance of Istikharah al-du'a, which is something that the Imams have spoken about in a lot of detail. Even if you look in these abwab of Bihar al-Anwar and you look at the different methods of istikhara, you'll see that the longest chapter is the one to do with Istikharah al-du'a. There are many, many different processes and methods of doing Istikharah al-du'a. Another narration we have here from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, "Man dakhala fi amrin bighayri istikhara thumma ibtuliya lam yu'jar." He says, if somebody was to enter into a matter without doing istikhara of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was to be tested after that, he would not receive any reward for the test or the hardship that he endured after. So this is another narration showing you the importance of Istikharah al-du'a. So you can see that there's many, many reports about making sure that you do istikhara all the time, Istikharah al-du'a, returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place khair in all of your affairs, all of the things that you choose to do. As with regards to Istikharah al-Qur'ah, the conditions for it are completely different. And this is where some of the misconceptions kind of arise with regards to this topic. Al-Istikhara bil-Qur'ah, which is the one where you are looking for an answer from the either Qur'an or the Tasbih, or however you choose to do it from the methods that are available, that is something that should be done after you have sought counsel, after you have asked experts. So for example, you want to get married. There's a girl that you found and you want to marry her. She's from a good family. She's a religious girl. You know, there's no issues that you can see, right? Everything seems to be going well. And then you go and you do an istikhara and it comes out bad, right? Some people, for this reason, they won't get married. But all of the conditions of why you should get married have been met. So for example, we have the narrations of Rasulullah, of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, telling you this is what you should be looking for in a woman. And Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they're speaking on the apparent level. So they're telling you, if you see these characteristics in a specific individual, then there's someone that you should marry. Or for example, the very famous narration of Rasulullah, if a man comes to you, he's good in his deen and his akhlaq, and he wants to marry your daughter, you marry your daughter to him. Now, if you can see the individual has these characteristics, and you're convinced of that, you have no shak in your mind, there's no concerns you have with the individual themselves, there is no reason at that point to do istikhara. Istikhara is something you do when you're confused, you've already sought counsel, you've exhausted your means, and then you still have some concerns and you're confused. And then you turn to this form of istikhara to give you either a yes or a no. So this rules out the people. For example, some people will ask, I did an istikhara, do I have to follow it? If you already were leaning towards something and you wanted to do it, right? And that was what you had almost, in some ways, you've already made a decision, right? You already wanted to do something. And you've just done istikhara for the sake of it. Then it's like you've done istikhara for no reason. You shouldn't have done it in the first place. Unless if you had concerns, you had shak, and it's something that you wanted to do, but you had shak in it, for example, then yeah, you can say, I did istikhara for a reason. I had a reason to do it. But there's many people that they do it for no reason. And there's a culture that's increased in our communities, and I can speak for the South Asian community. There are some individuals, they'll do istikhara for the smallest of things in their lives. It's not even like huge decisions. Small things in their life, they're calling up the Maulana, they're asking him, Yo Maulana, can you do an istikhara for me? And unfortunately, in some cases, it's even turned into a business. Because one Maulana, for example, he's known for Istikhara, for example. He'll be charging £5 to do an Istikhara for you, for example. These cultures is got out of hand in some cases. So there's these individuals that are exploiting the concept of Istikhara and using it against people. And you'll see, for example, sometimes there'll be shows on TV where there's a Maulana, he's doing Istikhara, and people are calling in doing Istikhara, and it's not always for anything important. It's just for anything small that they feel like they have to keep on doing Istikhara for. So what we can see here, therefore, is that Istikhara is not like a fortune-telling thing where you're meant to kind of like use it as something that you just use in your daily life for no reason, right? This is something that's actually there for a specific purpose. When you're concerned, you're confused, you've exhausted all of your possibilities, now you turn to this Istikhara. And this is the advice of the scholars as well. We see in one of the Istifta'at of Sayyid al-Sistani, he said, one may resort to the consultative method of Istikhara. This is speaking about Istikhara al-Qur'ah, with the intention of raja in situations where a person is confused and cannot prefer one side to the other after having pondered over it and having consulted those who know about it. So this is one of the conditions, like this is how you should be thinking about Istikhara al-Qur'ah. Doing Istikhara with the Qur'an, with the Tasbih, that should come right at the end, after you have sought counsel from a mu'min, believer, from an expert in the specific thing. After you've exhausted all of the things, if you're still confused, that's when you do this type of Istikhara. And this is another question that Sayyid Sistani received. I am a girl who has received many proposals for marriage, but each time my father has done Istikhara and it came out bad. What should I do? Should I keep waiting until the Istikhara comes out good? So you see, this is something that's actually affecting people in their lives, right? Perhaps sometimes there's a father, he's attached to his daughter, right? He doesn't want to let her go, right? And sometimes things like this become an excuse. Oh, the Istikhara came out bad. What can we do? You know, it's not in our hands. What does Sayyid Sistani say? He says, the woman and her guardians should give importance to the qualities of the man she chooses to marry. She should not marry except a man who is religious, chaste, of good character, not a drunkard, or someone who commits sins and evil deeds. It is better not to reject the proposition of a man who is religious and of good character. The Prophet ﷺ has said, when a man whose religion and character pleases you comes to you, then marry him. If you do not do so, there will be chaos and great corruption in the world. It is not good to rely on Istikhara when he or she can do research about the character and background of someone who comes with a proposal. So Sayyid Sistani, he's saying that when you've got the means to research into the character of somebody and you already have recommendations from Rasulullah, from the Ahlul Bayt on what to do in the situation that you're in, why are you relying on Istikhara? It's like, for example, when we're looking at Istikhara, first of all, Istikhara, al-Qur'ah, should only be done in matters where there isn't already advice from the Ahlul Bayt, or there isn't advice from the Ahlul Bayt that you have access to, for example, right? Because of course we believe that all the matters are covered in the Qur'an and Sunnah, of course. But if you don't have access to a specific matter and you're confused, you've consulted everyone you can, and it's at this point you do it. Obviously, you're not going to do Istikhara about things that are wajib or haram, right? You're not going to do Istikhara, should I play Salatul Fajr tomorrow? That is obviously, you can't do Istikhara for that, because that's something that's wajib. On a similar level, if there's something that is mustahab or sunnah or makruh in the advice of Ahlul Bayt, that is the primary advice you should follow before doing Istikhara al-Qur'ah. Yeah, the primary advice you should follow is, have the Ahlul Bayt advised me to do this thing? If they've already advised you, you don't require an Istikhara. The Ahlul Bayt have already advised to do that thing. Or if they've told you to stay away from something, right? It's makruh, for example. You don't need to do an Istikhara on that, right? You should take the advice that Ahlul Bayt have already given. So that's the conditions and how it should be looked at when we're looking at al-Istikhara al-Qur'ah. And with the caveat that Istikhara is very, very important and should be a part of all of our lives, in all of our actions, when we're thinking about Istikhara al-Du'a. Because many of us, I'm sure, coming into this episode today, had never even heard of the idea that there's Istikhara al-Du'a. You wouldn't have even known, for example, that there is actions that we do in our lives that we should be every single day asking for Allah to place khair in it. We don't think about that. right? And istikhara in our minds only means opening the Qur'an and figuring out whether you should do something or not. The concept of istikhara to du'a is one that should be pondered upon a lot and read about a lot. And all of the methods are present in the same volume that I've mentioned, Bihar al-Anwar, volume 88. And there's other books as well that are very, very good. If you are acquainted in the Arabic language, there's a book by Mullah Fayd al-Kashani about istikhara. It's called wal-Ithara and Ma'ani al-Istikhara. You have the book of Sayyid Abdullah Shubbar, Irshad al-Mustabsir fil Istikharat. And you have the book of Sayyid ibn Tawus, Radiyuddin Ali ibn Musa al-Dawudi al-Hasani al-Hilli, which is Fath al-Abwab Bayna Dhawi al-Albab wa Bayna Rabb al-Arbab fil Istikharat. So these are all very, very good books that are treatises, actually kind of, they are dedicated to the concept of istikhara, right? The different types of istikharat, when you should do them, when you should not do them, all the different kinds of the du'as that you should recite. And of course, if you want to know how to do istikhara, you can look online as well. There's a very, very good resource, du'as.org/istikhara. You'll be able to see all of the different kind of ways of doing istikhara al-Qur'ah and also istikhara to du'a on another section of du'as.org. So you'll see the examples of that. Let me just show you an example actually very quickly from istikhara to du'a before we finish, inshallah. Actually, before we get to that as well, there's another kind of istikhara that's very interesting, which is al-Istikhara bil-Istishara, which is doing istikhara through seeking counsel. This is a very, very interesting kind of topic as well. You see here that the Imam Sadiq says, إِذَا أَرَادَ أَحَدُكُمْ أَمْرًا فَلَا يُشَاوِرْ فِيهِ أَحَدًا حَتَّى يَبْدَأْ فَيُشَاوِرُ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. So he says, if one of you wants to do something, he shouldn't try and seek counsel of anybody before seeking counsel from Allah. What does he mean by this? فَقِيلَ لَهُ مَا مُشَاوَرَةُ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. What does it mean to seek counsel from Allah? He says, قال يستخير الله فيه أولا ثم يشاور فيه فإنه إذا بدأ بالله أجرى الله له الخير على لسان من شاء من الخلق. So he says that if you were to choose to do something first and you want to seek counsel on it from someone else, first you make dua to Allah, say, Ya Allah, place khair in this decision of mine. Then you would go to another individual and you would ask them for their counsel, or you would seek their counsel or their advice. And what this riwayah says is that when you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place khair in it, that person that you go to will give you the right advice. Right? So you can see here that there's a dynamic of putting Allah first in the dua, of asking Him to place khair in your decision. And then it says that Allah will place the khair upon the tongue of the person that you go to seek counsel from, right? And this is a form of istikhara that is preferred to the istikhara by the Qur'an as well, right? You make dua and then you seek counsel, and you have faith that the counsel that you're seeking now is going to be better because you made the istikhara by Allah by dua. So that's kind of like a merge of the two in some ways, because you've made the dua and you're asking for a decision from a mu'min, right? Which is seeking counsel. With regards to istikhara bid-du'a, we have here Imam Sadiq alayhi salam again. He mentions that if you want to do istikhara by du'a and you want to ask Allah to place the khair in what you are doing, he says that you should do this at the end of Salat al-Fajr. After you do the Tasbih, you say Alhamdulillah and you praise Allah and you praise the Nabi and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Then you ask Allah to place khair in your decision 100 times, for example. This is one example of the istikhara bid-du'a. So this is literally just saying, Ya Allah, give me khair in the decision that I've made, and keep me away from it if it is a bad thing for me. Yeah, and this is the istikhara that is very, very, very important that we should all have in our lives, because that is not only something that we find in all of the narrations of Ahlul Bayt where they're saying even to one another. And obviously Imam Ali's wasiyah to Imam al-Hasan is from an imam to an imam, but the lessons in them are not needed by Imam al-Hasan, they're needed by us. So this is something that we should really focus on if that is in the wasiyah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that we should increase in istikhara, it is this istikhara that he's asking us for, and to always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of the decisions and all of the actions that we take. Inshallah, I hope that's been a informative episode and been a good overview about istikhara, about the two different types of istikhara, when you should do it, when you shouldn't do it, and of course with the guidance from our esteemed scholars and ulama. Inshallah, this is the last episode of the Jumah Nights question and answer series. I hope you've enjoyed it, inshallah, and inshallah I'll be seeing you soon. Maybe it's going to be a long break before you see me again, but inshallah I hope that you're in the best of health and that you've benefited from the last 7 episodes of the Q&A series. And inshallah, as you know, we always have exciting projects planned for you guys, and we've got so much content that we want to go through, and of course none of this is possible without your support. So I want to thank all of you that have been able to watch these episodes, and inshallah you're able to continue benefiting from our platform on After Maghrib. Inshallah, I'll see you again when I see you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.